It's pouring rain outside. It's not very lovely today, but it's still nice to be here.
Yeah.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us, whether you're listening on the radio or watching online. My name is Joey Meugniot. I'm a political advisor, small business consultant, and a U.S. Army veteran with 2 tours to Afghanistan. So I'm excited to talk about the several topics we have lined up. We were just discussing a little bit before the show, and I think there's quite a few intersections for a lot of these stories where they're going to connect and impact, and there'll be a lot of overlap. So, Bree, what do we have on tap for today?
Yeah, so just a little bit about our show. So we're crossing faith, culture, and current events, right? So we try to bring in breaking news. We try to talk about what is happening in the church and how it's affecting the world, or how the world is affecting the church, because it's all intersections, right? So today we're going to be talking about discussing power and the origins of power. And, such as inalienable rights. It's one of the things that Joey really likes to talk about. What are inalienable rights and that kind of thing? How do we get them? And then the limits and the abuse of power and what we're seeing in today's culture, especially out of the news. So it's really exciting. Some news over the weekend, Joey, out of Rome, though, just kind of starting to focus on the church, is on Sunday, it was Divine Mercy Sunday. And a lot of people may not know the origins of Divine Mercy Sunday. I'm guessing that Catholic Drive Time had a lot of talk on this today and this past week. But Divine Mercy Sunday comes from a private revelation from St. Faustina Kowalska, who lived right before World War II and died right before it as well. And Jesus appeared to St. Faustina and spoke about his mercy. And it's just an amazing, amazing read. If you haven't read it, Divine Mercy in My Soul. And you should definitely go and take a look at her diary, because Jesus really speaks to a lot of people today in their own suffering and pain. So one of the things that I think was really interesting is that Pope Francis said in his a private mass right across the street from where I live, Joey, very close to the Vatican and Santo Spiritu, which is a very interesting kind of situated church on the corner of right where the Vatican is, but it's very, very close to St. Peter's. And he said a private mass that not everybody was able to attend. So, we've talked about this at St. Peter's. Private masses right now are forbidden. And he did a private mass at this shrine where St. Faustina's sisters run. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's nice to have private masses. Must be nice. I'm sure there's a lot of priests out there and probably bishops and cardinals that would like to have private masses inside St. Peter's, but they can't. So here we are. So I'm glad that he was able to do that, and I'm sure it was lovely.
He had some really beautiful words to say. There are a lot of people who don't want to listen to Pope Francis, maybe because they don't like the politics that are coming out of the Vatican. Some people just look at everything he says as being, scriptural. So we've got this polarized section within the church, unfortunately, right now. But I would highly recommend people take a look at some of the quotes he said out of the Mass. Really, really beautiful, talking about how everybody needs mercy, and Divine Mercy Sunday is like the perfect time to begin showing mercy to others as well. And he gives some specifics, and I think it was really helpful. But, talking about mercy, another story that has broken in the last month, but really has gotten a lot of press in the last week, has been, do you remember, Joey, hearing about Benedictine nuns who made it to like the top of Billboard charts back in 2012, 2013, 15? They recorded a whole bunch of like music, Gregorian chant and whatnot. They're beautiful singers. Do you remember hearing about those Benedictine nuns, seeing them on TV?
A little bit. I remember hearing about them a little bit. Like it struck me as something that I did remember it happening. I remember, 2012 is a few years ago now. I feel like it was 2 years ago, but it really was.
Yeah, I know.
Much longer.
Long.
So yeah, it does strike a bell. Yeah.
Well, they're really young. It's a really young order, but they're Benedictines. So Benedictines are not young. They're like the oldest order in monastic life, one of the oldest orders in monastic life, but they're very young age-wise. The abbess is in her, I think, early 40s. And they're traditional. So they do the traditional Latin Mass, and they are located in Missouri, right? And they have reported now in their new monastery that they were able to fundraise based off of their Billboard chart topping chart Billboard chart topping albums. Excuse me. Good morning. That they were able to fundraise for this beautiful monastery in Missouri. And lo and behold, now they're having to deal with violent harassment, Joey. Violent harassment, including gunshots on a regular basis in their monastery. And what I find really interesting is that just recently, gunshots like went through, ricocheted into the Mother Abbess's cell, her room where she was sleeping. She was just feet away. She could have gotten hit. And in all of the reports, I'm not seeing anything with regards to police investigations in this. And then I started to think, Missouri, St. Louis. Okay. Well, this kind of makes sense based off of the push in the last few years against police presence in certain cities in and around the country. And so what's the alternative here now? Because we have a group of nuns who are cloistered nuns who can't really defend their large property, and they're being harassed on a regular basis. Shots being fired at the nuns. I mean, who does that? What are your thoughts?
I don't know who shoots at nuns. That seems a little bit much to shoot at a monastery or anything like that. It's pretty, interesting because I was reading the article earlier and it said that they could hear the bullets whizzing by. They couldn't see who shot them, and it's a very frightening experience as someone who's been shot at. It's not fun.
No.
It's not a good experience. So
Right.
But and I know that they're not in a super large city like they're not, but still, anytime we start talking about defunding the police or changing the way that the police operate in any particular area, you're going to have a rise in crime. Whether it's random, somebody driving by and randomly shooting at a building or into a window, like stuff like this happens because they think they can get away with it because there just aren't enough police. And at a time when more police are retiring or resigning than probably history at this point, I find it very troubling that we see stories like this because there's not a lot that they can do aside from just have a larger police presence in the area and patrol more often so that they can do that. But if they don't have the resources to do it, so you got to pick one. You either want to defund the police or you want to have lower crime, but you can't have both. So I will always err on the side of more training, more funding to police, and a larger police presence. I think that we need more police in our communities, and I think an overwhelmingly large amount of Americans agree with that sentiment. They'd rather have a higher police presence in every community, regardless of ethnicity or anything else, or socioeconomic status. Everyone unequivocally wants more police in there, and because everyone, just normal people, see that if you have more police in your neighborhood, crime is likely to be lower in your area, which makes you feel safer, which allows businesses to thrive and succeed, which allows more money to flow into communities. It all gets connected together. And this is a good example of that. If they don't have the resources to do it, especially if it's a small town agency, they might, and if they get funding from the state or from a larger city or they're in a county, all that stuff trickles down to where, they might not have the resources to do that. I mean, I think it's worth more investigation, more thought, more looking into it to see what they can do. And we have to think about these things. So
right. And it's one of those things too, Joey, that when we think about it, I mean, these are big stories that are coming out into secular press as well as Catholic press. And I was actually quite shocked about not having the question asked. So what's being done about this? Because shooting at anybody is illegal without self-defense, and this is an offensive course of action that's being taken against these nuns. Obviously, people don't want them there, and the question has to be why. And I think it's an important thing to be asking. And I just was kind of shocked that the reports aren't coming out in that way. But here's the thing: you mentioned, I find this really interesting because I also have seen the factual data showing that all communities want better trained, better equipped police force. And one of the things that came out in the last week that is, and we'll hopefully be putting up a video later on, if not right now, but later on, of what is going on in another story that came out of Virginia that really shows the need to train police on, the measures of force, to be met. The escalation of force to be met, because an Army lieutenant, an Army officer was pulled over, and it's all captured. This went all viral, captured on police body cam footage in December. He was pulled over, and he keeps asking, he's African American, he keeps asking, what have I done? He's in full uniform. His hands are out of the window, as he should have his hands out of the window when he's pulled over. And the police are right there. They have their weapon drawn, Joey. I mean, I know that you saw this video. It is shocking. They have their weapon drawn, pointing right into, and incorrectly pointing their weapon, like sideways pointing their weapon into his window. He has his hands out, and they've pulled him over. He keeps asking, what have I done? He does the right thing. He says, I'm reaching down to unbuckle my buckle, but they keep yelling at him. And then one of the police holsters his weapon, takes out like pepper spray, and pepper sprays the guy in his face. And so all of this comes out now. I think it was CNN that broke the story, or reported on AP. Actually, it was AP. AP came out and said he was, they did an internal investigation, and one of the arresting officers has now lost his job. What are your thoughts, Joey, before we go to break?
I have a lot of thoughts on that one. So
okay, so we'll go back to it afterwards too.
We're gonna have to circle back to that one. So first of all, I don't. He should have known better. I mean, he's an Army officer. If he had done this on an Army base, what did he think was going to happen? When the police pull you over, when they light you up, when you see those red and blue lights behind you, that's a pretty good indication you need to pull over. Not when it's convenient for you, not when you think it's time for you to pull over, but now. Like, now is a good time for you to pull over. So I think that he should have known better. Also, the whole interaction could have gone differently had that happened. Had he just pulled over. Now he has reasoning and logic to why behind why he did what he did, and he wanted to get to a well-lit place. But that doesn't matter. That's not what you're taught to do. That's not what you're trained to do. Had he done the same thing on a military base, what did he think would have happened?
Right.
So he's a young lieutenant. He is in uniform. And they recognize that. They said as much. Now, did it need to escalate so far so fast? I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there, and it's really easy 4 months later to look at some body cam footage and decide differently. But when you're ordered to get out of a car, it's not time for you to start this isn't a litigation session. You're not before the judge. This isn't for you to go back and forth and argue and plead your case. Get out of the car. So when we come back, I will dig a little bit more into that, because it's a topic that I feel pretty strongly about. I have a lot of friends and family in law enforcement. I was military police in the Army as well, so I have a slightly different view on some of these things. So we'll keep unpacking that and probably several other topics that are related to this when we come back. So with that being said, I'm going to kick it back over to Bree, and we will see you on the flip side of this quick break.
This is Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. When we get back, we'll continue this conversation. And you can see we don't always agree on everything. We look forward to talking with you in the flip side.
Protestants believe the Bible is the only source for determining Christian truth, a doctrine called sola scriptura, which is Latin for scripture alone. Is this true? The answer is no, and here's the reason. It's self-refuting. Since knowledge of which books constitute scripture is a Christian truth, sola scriptura demands that the Bible tell us what scripture is. But guess what? It doesn't. The Bible never tells us which books God has inspired. So if sola scriptura were true, well, then we'd have to deny our knowledge of what Scripture is. But that's self-refuting, my friends. The only way to have such knowledge is if Christ established an infallible church to tell us so. But Protestants reject this idea, leaving us with an infallible effect, knowledge of what Scripture is, produced by a fallible cause, the Church, which is absurd. Sola Scriptura is definitely not a doctrine that's compatible with reason. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Looking for a Catholic university where the greatest works of Western and Catholic tradition are the foundation for learning, all in an environment that is faithful to the magisterium? Recommended by the Cardinal Newman Society, the University of Dallas offers an exceptional liberal arts education, preserving the wisdom of the past while preparing students for world-changing futures. Academically excellent, always faithful. Apply today at udallas.edu.
And welcome back. This is Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. I'm your host, Bree Dail. I'm joined by Joey Meugniot. And on our last segment, Joey and I were discussing a video that came out of body cam footage from December showing an Army lieutenant being arrested and some of the fallout for that. Joey and I have, I think, a little slightly differing opinions on some of the fallout to this. I want Joey to continue just a little bit, and you know that's one of the things that Joey and I really emphasize here on our show is that we actually like civil debate and the civil exchange of ideas. This is part of having free speech, right? And we want other people who have critical thinking to come on our show and engage with us, because that is something that's really important to get back to civility. Since unfortunately we have been so separated with this virus, many people have polarized, and I think the only way we get back to civility is, you know, with what Pope Francis has said, there is an aspect of dialogue here. We do have to have dialogue, but we have to know how to dialogue with one another. So going back to this, and I don't know, Adrian, our producer, do you have by chance the video to throw up of this while we're talking? This is the, hopefully we'll have that video of the police officers engaging this lieutenant. And you know, it's pretty shocking actually to watch. Joey, so you think at this point, now I have a real problem with the way that this police officer is holding his weapon. You never hold your weapon in that way.
Well,
and to me that already says,
no.
I don't
So,
have this, look at this guy. Holding
so
like
yes
that.
and no. So depending on tactics, but also like there's firearms, and you know somebody's gonna to troll me in the comments. But you know that actually is not abnormal. Like the way he's holding it, because after this, if he needs to he can shoot from that position and still has, but he can punch out as well. So the tactics aside, I've seen plenty of people do that. I've shot like that as well. So it's not completely abnormal. To do that. He's also not like drawn down. It's up near his chest, is where he's holding his weapon at this particular
point. Yeah, but then he holsters the weapon, though, Joey. This is one of the reasons why I find it very interesting. It's like the escalation of force. Right now, we're seeing in this video he's spraying his pepper spray. He holsters the weapon.
So he de-escalated, right? So he had a weapon out. He de-escalated.
But it seems like it's a bit reactionary to the way that he de-escalates. Is like, oh, well, I'm going to holster my weapon. I was inappropriately holding it. I'm going to take out my spray and I'm going to spray you while you're in the car. Again, you know, it seems like this.
So he realized he didn't need the weapon. There wasn't anything, like there wasn't a threat at the time. He holsters his weapon and de-escalates and goes back down to a different level of force, right? So pepper spray. So like you don't have to just go straight to shooting right away, right?
Right.
So he de-escalated to back down. He's giving him clear and concise commands, and he's asking questions and not really complying. Like he's just if you get out the car,
Right.
and follow what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, if you're an officer, you know how to give orders, right? It's part of that's taking orders. So like when someone tells you that has a lawful reason to stop you, i.e. you didn't have plates on your car, whether they were in the back window or anything else, pull over. Be like, hey, I just bought the car. The plates are, I don't have to have it registered yet, whatever it is. They're going to ask you, right? But if you make them chase you, right, and then you have to They have to force you to get out of the car because you want to argue with him. This isn't a court of law. He's not a judge. He's just doing his job. So
right.
now he could he have handled it differently, slightly differently? Yes. And
Obviously,
I think you see some of that.
Yeah, and obviously
he's since been fired.
Yeah.
But seeing this, there's a lot of stuff that as 4 months later, and when we can have the benefit of not being there, there's a lot to dissect every little action, right? So from what he did, in my opinion, I'm not an expert in tons of these things, right? I'm not like
well, you were a police officer at one point in the military,
but I'm
right?
I'm not a tactics advisor, right? I don't teach tactics or anything like this. It's been a while since I've had to do any of those things. But they gave him clear, concise commands and told him what to do, and he did not comply. Period. Full stop. He should have pulled over when he didn't. Now, whether he got pepper sprayed and handcuffed and all the other things, but the important thing is like, and we talked about this briefly before the show, but when they won't get out of their car, when something happens and they don't stop right away, red flags start and a little alarm bells start going off. Why aren't they stopping? Right. Okay, they stopped over here. Why'd they stop over here? And you got to think, you're a police officer. In the back of your mind, every time you put on your vest and you put on your duty belt and you get in your car and you go out to do something, like there's tons of stories where cops are just sitting there having coffee and get shot in the head because they were like, so you have that mentality every time you do something, everywhere you go. So you're thinking to yourself, you're driving along, this guy's not stopping, what's he doing? All right, cool. He finally pulls over, get out of the car. Get out of the car now. He doesn't comply. Get out of the car now. Like, I'm telling you to get out of the car. Like, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it after you get out of the car, and I make sure you're not going to shoot me. Because 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, an officer let a woman go back into her car. She pulled out a 9mm and shot him 3 times in the chest. That's what you're thinking of. That's what you're thinking of every time that these kind of things happen, right? So if you're not, if he's an Army officer, he has been trained, he knows what he's supposed to be doing, then do it. There's no reason for you to start arguing with him and everything else. It doesn't matter. Whether you get a ticket or you get arrested, take it to court, figure it out in court. But at this point, pull your car over, follow the commands you're being given clearly, and then you can talk about it. Once the officers know that they're safe, they're not going to do anything. They're just going to keep yelling at you and pepper spraying you and tasing you and whatever you do till they get to the point where they feel that they're safe and that they have control of the situation. At that point, they don't have to control the situation. So I say that to say that they're now, could it be handled differently? It's very easy to see after the fact. We could be like, okay, he didn't need to do that. We didn't need to pepper spray him. They could have taught, like, okay, that's fine. But in that moment, it's very difficult to look back and not put yourself in their shoes, especially if you have been in their shoes. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that comes into play in this. Like, a lot of these guys are overworked. There's so many mitigating circumstances to all of this that we really have to take a hard look at, not just a 30-second video or a 90-second video, however long it is, 4 months later, and start murderboarding this guy's tactics and procedures, just like we've done with the murder trial that's going on now, right? So had this Army officer, and I mean, they tried to link it to white supremacy and racism. He's Hispanic. His name's Gutierrez. So it had nothing to do with race. He was just doing his job. Now, you can argue about how he did his job, but the point is that he was just trying to get the guy to pull over because he was driving without plates, and he didn't stop. Start your conversation. Start there, and then start to think about all the things that could have gone wrong leading up to that point. And I think that's where the conversation needs to happen. Then we can break apart everything else later and figure out how he could have been trained better, what he could have done. But in my mind, that's how this situation played out. And I know plenty of people that have been in that position. I have cousins and friends and close friends, close family members, people I've deployed with that are in law enforcement, and they go through this every single day. Every single day, that traffic stop could be the last thing that you do. So it's important that we remember the risks that these people are that law enforcement is undertaking, and we try to keep that in mind. So was it perfect? Not even close. Was he doing his job? I think so. Did I think that he's got a case for wrongful termination? I don't know enough about that jurisdiction or that agency to tell you what their proper tactics and procedures should be. But he didn't shoot him. So, I mean, that's obviously a win for a lot of people. I mean, everybody went home at the end of the night. So that's how it's supposed to work. So they can take it to court and they can litigate it and figure out if he was wrong, if his constitutional rights were breached, which they might be, they might have been. Again, I'm not an investigator. I'm not a lawyer. So they'll figure that out. But the important thing from that thing is pull over and talk to them. They're humans. If you pull over immediately and be like, hey, yeah, I just got the car, I'm coming back from drill, or, I just got off duty, and I'm going home, they're going to be like, oh, all right, man.
Well, the thing though is, Joey, and one of the things that I know is a concern for a lot of people right now with this escalation of tensions between certain communities is the fact that are cops going to be over because of, just like you had said before, with shootings that are happening with police officers, the tensions are very high, and so you've got this guy who's not really complying yet. They've gone to number 10 now instead of pushing up this escalation, and they go all the way up to drawing out their weapons, and one of the things that when I was serving in the military, I would often go shooting with a lot of my fellow officers. And there's a little bit, maybe just so people understand, there's a little bit of a difference between how things are dealt with in the military between officers and non-commissioned officers and enlisted folk when it comes to anything that deals with law enforcement activity. If you are an officer and you deal with law enforcement, you could immediately put yourself in, or your commission could immediately be, you may be forced to resign. You may have to go to a non-judicial punishment, and when that happens, your career is over as an officer. So this happened in December. We're now seeing 4 months later, he has likely gone through that, and whether or not he lost his commission, we don't know. But in what I see, and what I was saying earlier, is that here we are. I'm going out and I'm going shooting with my fellow military officers, Navy SEALs, Marine Corps officers mostly. And one of the things that I saw, and one of the things that they complained a lot about, and this was in the largest Navy base in the world, this is in Norfolk, is that the police are not well trained with the handling of their weapons. And I saw that multiple times in Virginia. The handling, or the handling of weapons just seemed very. It didn't seem like they really knew exactly how to handle their weapons. And when I'm watching this video, it just causes me a lot of anxiety to see how he's holding his weapon, how he's pointing at the man. Whenever you're pointing a weapon at someone, that is a serious, you are planning, you're not shooting to maim. When you're pointing a weapon, you are planning to discharge that weapon. And like you said, the other individual is, police are human, so is the other individual. So I'm just watching this and I'm saying, okay, I think the internal investigation was legitimate. Because they watched the body camage. It does seem like the police officer is just angry at this point, and he takes out the his pepper spray. He holsters his weapon.
Angry. It's a stressful environment.
It's very stressful.
It's a stressful environment. So there are a couple things. So
yeah,
it's a stressful environment, and at that moment they don't know why he didn't pull over. I mean,
right.
Just because he's got a uniform on doesn't mean a whole lot of anything. I mean, a year ago maybe, an Army lieutenant stole an APC and was driving around town. And just because you have a uniform on does not mean that you're absolved of any crime or any wrongdoing. Doesn't matter. So at that moment, he could have been having a bad day. He could have been a dude in the uniform that he bought at this Army surplus store, right? So you don't know. And what's stopping him? You don't know this as you're looking into a blacked out SUV. Is he going to go grab a pistol out of the glove compartment of the center console? And as soon as you walk to the window, so yeah, there's a threat. You're trying to figure out what's going on. So
right.
Again, I think a lot of, and this is speculation completely, but I'd be curious to find out when they release this internal investigation, how much of it was he did something wrong, and how much of it was they were trying to lower their
cover
risk.
This issue. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Because I'm fairly certain that this agency is not. There's a lot of money and lawsuits about to happen, or a lot of large dollar value lawsuits are about to happen. Right. So how much of it was mitigating the risk, and how much of it was he actually did something wrong? I mean, I've seen a lot of police officer body cam footage that they did things way more wrong than that guy did, and for him to get fired, Hey, I want to know, and I'm curious
Well,
to see
and
what the police has to say
it's one
about
of those things. It's one of those things too, Joey. That when we talk about equipping our police officers, right, giving them the necessary training, and also body cam footage really can be a savior for police officers, as we're seeing right now in a trial that has just resumed. Joey, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's going on also in the last 48 hours or 24 hours. In new riots and a new situation that seems to be, pushed as disinformation in social media that has now caused riots. So, first, what was that trial that's resumed?
So the Derek Chauvin trial about the death of George Floyd. So it sparked a lot of protests and a lot of stuff last summer. It lasted. It's still lasting apparently. There's tons of stuff going on, but the trial is happening now. It took them forever to select the jury, to try to find unbiased jurors, which seems pretty impossible, but they managed to do that. And now they're going through, and last week they had medical examiners on, and they had tactics experts, and the chief of police, I believe, was on as a witness for, and watching the back and forth. But the video, there's a lot of video. We talk a lot about video and a lot about medical reports and drugs in the system, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's fascinating to see all this information come out, because I'd say a lot of people already have their mind made up, except for potentially these 12 jurors have their mind made up, because there's just that the facts are what they are, and you can come to the conclusion. Now the bar for murder is pretty high, especially if for the charges that they've got against him. The bar is very high,
beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what's expected.
The very high bar. So you have without a reason, with no doubt, are you 100% sure it's exactly what happened and what did
he
this?
intended to murder him.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna have a tough time doing that. So it's interesting because there's already riots in that state going on now. So I'm curious to see what happens, regardless of the outcome. I don't think it's going to matter too much what the outcome is, whether it's an acquittal or a conviction. I don't think it's going to have too big of an impact on what happens to the community. I think the community is going to go crazy either way, and I think that there's going to be a lot of damage and a lot of people are going to be hurt one way or the other. And the situation that happened over the weekend, again, there was a police involved shooting. They pulled, and there was an individual. They ran the plates. The plates came back to a parent of someone that had warrants, so they tried to stop the car. They stopped the car. He got out, went back into the car again. There's a theme. So if you go back into the car, it's probably not going to end well. Like, don't go back in your car. That's just, don't do it. So they don't know why he went back into the car, but he wasn't supposed to go back to the car. So he went back in the car, started reaching for something, and that's when he was shot. So then he got into the car and drove several blocks away, hit another car, and finally stopped. They called EMS, where unfortunately he passed away.
Now those are facts that have been provided now to the media and to the general public. But early this morning or late last night, what was put out in social media was something different. What was put out in social media by, blue check, verified, very large accounts, left-leaning accounts, I should say, was that, very inflammatory, was that he was pulled over for air fresheners in his car. Air fresheners that were hanging, and he is a 20-year-old father of a 2-year-old. So again, now we're putting pictures of him with his 2-year-old, so making it emotional and making it very much like this is a human interest story emotional wise. And he was pulled over by cops for having air fresheners hanging in his car, and because of that he was shot. And because he was African American, he was shot. And so there is no justice, no peace this morning. And we have been seeing within Brooklyn Center, which is the city that this took place, riots, looting, and the responses of people of these videos that are coming out from media on the looting is, well, they have insurance. This is reparation. So now we're seeing this, this movement in what has been pushed, inflammatory. And I would say for those people who are looking on social media and seeing that, the first question that anybody should have, whether it's left or right, is that logical? that the police would pull someone over for air fresheners and shoot them? Is that reasonable? Is that supported by evidence? Like, where are these people getting this story? And Joe, you said that that story came from his mom.
Yeah, his mom said that she was on the phone with him when it happened. She was talking to his girlfriend, and the girlfriend started screaming, "They pulled us over for having air fresheners." They didn't pull you over for air fresheners. They pulled you over because your boyfriend and your son had a warrant out for his arrest. That's why they pulled you over, because you were driving a car that belonged to you. And if it's a small agency, they probably know the guy. They probably know the car. So
Right.
I highly doubt this is the first interaction that they've had with this. Now, I don't know this. Again, speculation.
Well,
just
warrants.
historically
Warrants.
speaking. They know he's got so they ran him. He had a warrant. So if you have a warrant out for your arrest, you're getting pulled over. You're getting stopped. You're getting arrested. That's it. It's a wrap.
Right.
There's nothing. They're not doing anything else. They're going to arrest you. If you have a warrant out for your arrest and the police stop you, you're going to jail.
And unfortunately, these are small businesses that are owned by individuals, some of them minorities, some of them not, who are now having to wake up this morning, clean up. And there's a video of, managers cleaning up the broken glass in front of their small business where there's nothing left inside. And yes, they may have insurance, but that may be that that insurance will now escalate and they will have to close. I
saw Little Caesars on fire. I saw a GameStop on fire and broken into. They were taking video games and Xboxes and PS5s. It's tough for me to draw a correlation between some kind of justice and what actually ends up happening. And if you're a small business, so some of those are bigger businesses, all right? But what people don't realize is, it's Little Caesars, and you've probably seen them all over, but those are all franchises. They're owned by somebody, like someone in the community owns the business.
And they're hiring people who now don't have a job because they don't have
I got to rebuild my store, right? Yeah. So now I have to rebuild my store. I have to do all these, and that's just on those ones. Like, there's plenty of small businesses. There was liquor stores, all kinds of stuff that was broken into and looted. Because when I'm craving justice, I need to
take it out on my neighbor. Yeah.
Well, no, I need to go get some Jack Daniels, because that's what really does it for me. So
I mean, it's very sad. There again, on the other side, there has been arguments that's there's no peace to this. Like, if the only way to be able to get something done is that if you cause a large enough escalation to get an attention to something, because the justice itself is never being brought. And that's interesting, Joey, because it actually correlates to another part of the stories that are breaking this past week that really made some headline. Washington, it wasn't Washington Post, it was New York Post, actually reported, and many others, as did Fox News and others, that, and this was all over social media, that one of the co-founders of the Black Lives Matters movement, and who is a self-declared Marxist, and I think that's really important for people to understand, is that she has declared herself from day one as a Marxist. They had a manifesto that was seriously Marxist and anti-nuclear family, actually, as well. Her name is Patrice Khan Cooler. She purchased 4 high-end homes since 2016 for a total of $3.2 million. And it has gone viral because this is the Black Lives Matter movement, which is supposed to be supporting justice organizations for minority community. And it's very interesting to see that followers of the BLM movement, real individuals who claim to be Marxists themselves, have come out now and condemned her for taking money, $3.2 million. And this money comes from a book deal that she did, supposedly TV deals that she has done. But it really does seem to be very financially beneficial for her, this building upon crises. What are your thoughts on that, Joey, just based off of everything we're talking about just now?
I mean, grifters are going to grift, I guess. And I wish I was shocked by it. I do. I wish I was shocked. I wish I was like, oh, I didn't see that one coming. But like all good Marxists, it's rules for thee and not for me. So of course she has 4 homes that total $3.2 million, just like other good Marxist socialists like Bernie Sanders do.
Yeah.
They love to tell us all how awful and terrible we are and how we can do things and why things are broken, but they sure love all the benefits of having all of those things. And, some of the people that are condemning her, but they're not really upset about it. I bet they're just mad that they didn't think of it first. Right. So that's part of the problem, is that, there's a lot of fake outrage out there about so many different things, and for what? So that she can buy 4 homes. She has 4 homes.
Yeah, and it's on the right and the left.
Yeah, go ahead, the most recent one she bought is a $1.4 million house in like a 99% predominantly white neighborhood. So white people for her are either the devil, and white people are destroying everything, and there's so much systemic racism that's going on that I got to live with all of them in a $1.4 million house, because that's how awful it is here. I'm going to show them. What are you doing? Stop it. Stop grifting. Stop trying to steal money from people that you're basically lying to, and pushing a neo-Marxist agenda. And that's what she said she did. There's videos of her saying it. It's not like she tried to hide it.
She's not hidden. But one of the things I find really interesting, Joey, is the making money off of crises. We've talked about this a few times, but I actually am publishing this week an op-ed. It's more of a report on a conference that took place with Dr. Jan Benz last month. And when we get back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But just what I find very interesting about what Jan said, and this is going to be on the Epoch Times, is the foundation of this movement that has come out from right after World War II, that is called critical theory, is based off of innating any kind of real authority in order to remake a man into understanding that there is no authority. And because we're social creatures, we will be drawn to the next authority who steps up. And that's what we seem to be seeing at the BLM movement right now, being happening. But when we get back, we'll be talking more about this, and we're going to be talking about the powers at be making decisions based off of crisis, COVID measures, and whatnot. We are talking right now, live from Rome. This is Intersections, Crossing Faith, Culture, and Current Events. We'll be right back.
Many Protestants believe Christians can be absolutely sure they're going to heaven, because John tells us in 1 John 5:13, I write this that you may know you have eternal life. But is this true? The answer is no, and here are some reasons why. First, John writes in the next verse, and this is the confidence which we have in him. For John, the knowledge we have of our salvation is not a certainty without doubt, but a confident assurance. And that's the Catholic belief. Second, we know this is what John means because in verse 15, he draws a parallel between our knowledge of salvation and our knowledge that God grants our requests. Do we have absolute certitude that God will grant our requests? No, but we are confident he will answer. So, Catholics need not worry. John is not teaching Protestant doctrine here. I'm Carlo Broussard with the ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Your Odyssey begins at the University of Dallas, the premier Catholic liberal arts university in Texas. With campuses in Irving and Italy, UD's rigorous core curriculum sets it apart. An education rooted in the great works of Catholic and Western tradition. An education that ennobles and enables students in their pursuit of wisdom, truth, and virtue. Undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs available. Start your college odyssey at the University of Dallas today. Go to udallas.edu to learn more.
And good morning from Rome. This is Intersections with Bree and Joey. We welcome you back to our last segment. And over the break, we were reading through some of your comments, and it seems like most of our listeners today are agreeing with Joey. And so I'm sad. No, I'm just kidding. I'm glad that we are being able to induce these critical thinking. I feel like I am being drawn more and more to Joey's point, but that usually happens. He usually makes his point so clear. I feel like I am convinced. I'm so glad that you're joining us today. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we really hope that you engage with us on social media Even if you're not hearing us on the radio right now, live, you can come back and see us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter. Joey has a handle on Twitter. I'll let you say your handle in a second, Joey. My handle is Bree Dail on Twitter, and you can also find me on Meugniot and Parler and on all of the other social media as well as Facebook. But Joey, what? Just quickly before we go back, what's your social media handle? Because I can't remember what it is. You don't. Oh, you always don't remember.
It is all. I do this every time. So it's at real J Meugniot, Minyo. So that's how you say my last name. So if you look at it all spelled crazy like, just know that it's Meugniot. So at real J Meugniot, because apparently there's more than one, and I need to differentiate myself. So
well, you are
that's me.
very
you can
real.
Find me on. I am not a cat or a cat lawyer. So you can find me on. If you haven't seen that video, we'll put a link in the description later, so you can watch the.
We'll put that in there.
The Zoom call. But you can find me on Instagram, Twitter. I don't know, everywhere. So. Yeah. So it's a mouthful, but when you see it, it makes sense. So there you go.
So we were talking about pretty serious stuff in our last episode or last segment, rather, that has to deal with pretty controversial things right now, which are going on, riots that are taking place in the boundary of the foundation of the riots. And I'm really excited about this story that is going to be popping with the Epoch Times. Dr. Jan Benz did an amazing job kind of breaking down a philosopher from Hungary, his idea of the foundation points for critical theory, and now what we call critical race theory. This idea that we've got to polarize and break down all traditional forms of authority in order to be able to really find our real selves. And in reality, what happens is that once you break down all authority and you have just chaos everywhere, because we're social creatures, we're going to tend towards going into these groups. So we see that even with Antifa, right? They're supposed to be, non-formed, no basis of authority whatsoever. They're all just supposed to be a collective, but that doesn't take place. And we see that also with BLM. They're not supposed to be have like a centralized authority. They're supposed to be Marxist. It should be a group thought. But instead, we see these individuals who take over in authority, who could take into leadership, and then what ends up happening? They buy 4 houses with $3.2 million. So we see this taking place. But in a new note, something that I'm really excited about talking about, because I never thought I'd see the day, we are actually seeing AP report today that lawmakers are seeking to limit long-term use of emergency powers by governors. And this is totally in response to COVID measure overreach. Joey, take it away.
So when you talk about Antifa, it's very important, and I feel like not enough people know this, or any of these kind of decentralized groupings that they have. BLM functions very similar. So Antifa was founded by German communists. Period. Full stop. If that tells you, that should tell you everything you need to know about Antifa. But modern Antifa, or as I like to call them, soy ISIS with preferred pronouns, I can't understand for the life of me why people think that this kind of behavior is okay. They just destroy cities. There's videos last year of them shooting, like executing people in the streets, beating people with baseball bats and everything else. It's as un-American as you can be. And the fact that they call themselves anti-fascist is, I mean, they should be sued for false advertising. But
yeah,
the critical theory portion of it, and when we kind of slide that over and we start talking about the governments of states, the state legislature starting to legislate again, and realizing that they've given so much power away to the executive branch that things are out of balance. And the reason why things are out of balance is because we're supposed to have 3 co-equal branches. All the state governments are modeled identically almost on the federal government, right? And so the federal government was modeled actually on Virginia, but that's a different topic. But there's supposed to be 3 co-equal branches, but in a lot of these states, they're not co-equal anymore. The executive branch has so much power, they can unilaterally do almost anything through executive order because it's been allowed, and then the way that the law was written, it was upheld by a lot of these
Which
state
is also a problem
courts.
with the federal government with the executive orders too, which is why we've seen so many of the orders that were made by President Trump, because he was trying to get things done, right? He bypassed, however, the way that executive order is supposed to take place, right, Joey, is that if the president does an executive order, he proposes it then to legislation to make it into law. So it's supposed to go through the legislative branch to eventually become law. It's not supposed to be, de facto, the president says something. Why? Because it's not into law. So the moment a next president comes in, maybe on the polar opposite side, like we see when Trump left and President Biden came in, is all of those are overturned within 24 hours. So the drawdown, for example, out of Afghanistan, executive order, what's happening now? That's been paused. It was overturned, and now they're talking about sending troops over to the Balkans. So you're 100% correct. We're seeing hopefully a rebalance in this, which is why I say I'm so excited, because the use of emergency powers, it's there for the first 48 hours usually, before the lawmakers get in and they start to enact, or they start to act upon law enforcement of current laws, or reminding our executives of the laws that are currently in place.
So executive orders aren't supposed to be legislation. They're not. That's not what. So executive orders are a letter from the chief executive of a state or the government. So in this case, the president or the governor, directing executive agencies. So directing executive federal or state agencies to do something that they are already allowed to do or within the confines of an existing law. That's what's supposed to happen. So they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to be. So they're just. But what they do is they circumnavigate, legislation, and they just say, "Hey, let's go ahead and we've got some wiggle room here, and then we'll do it." Right. So that's what they're doing now. And then when it comes to emergency powers, the legislatures gave a lot of these governors emergency powers, but they never took them away. So they just keep right on going. They're just going to continue.
Yeah, and what happens? What happens, Joey, when you start giving powers to governors? You keep giving powers, and I'm going to ask Adrian to throw this up. We're heading towards the end of our show, but I'd like Adrian to go ahead and throw up some of the video that took place in Italy. What happens when you give powers to a centralized government and to executive governments? What you end up having is massive protests to try to get those powers back. And what we're seeing in the video, hopefully that you're seeing right now, is a massive protest that took place over the last week in Rome, and it's happening all over Italy right now, of people who make their livelihoods by service industry, which is the majority in Italy, of people who are out of work right now and may never go back to work because the government has made a decision to shut down the entire country and put it into red zone or orange zone, which means no cafes are open, no restaurants are open, people are out of work, flights are not being they don't have, their tourism is gone, and so people are desperate, and people became violent during these protests against police. So what you're seeing there is, I'm reporting for the Epoch Times, and I'm getting video, and I'm talking to people. But what you're seeing there is people are rushing towards the police and are extremely upset, and it was violent. But it's the only way you get, it seems, in Europe to get your powers that you've given over to the government back. But in the United States, we don't have to do that. We are seeing our legislation taking this back from the governors. Joey, what are your final thoughts on this?
So anytime the government takes power from the people, they will never give it back. Period. Full stop. You can write that, chisel it in stone, wherever you want to, but they will not. The government will not give power back to the people. That's not how it works. So, but what we are seeing is they're going to start removing these emergency powers and putting in place laws that allow them to have some frameworks or a framework around emergency powers in the future, like saying, it will only last X amount of days until, or dependent upon the legislature saying things, which is how it's supposed to work. The legislature are supposed to do these things. The legislature legislates, they make laws, and the governors or the executive branch signs the laws. I Schoolhouse rocked it, but I'm pretty sure that's how it still works. So there's no reason why they should have all the governors should have all of these powers just forever. There's no reason for it. So, it's a good thing that the legislatures are stepping up and saying, all right, enough's enough. We need to put laws in place that make sense to limit the power of the executive branch, to bring things more in line. You're seeing the same type of action when it comes to election laws, to Second Amendment protections. A lot of the legislatures, even if they have Democratic governors, you're seeing legislatures that are creating laws, and if the governor vetoes them, they're overriding the veto, and it's still becoming law because that's how it's supposed to work.
Right. So one of the last stories right before we take off for the day is a report out of CNN saying that 40% of U.S. Marines have declined the COVID vaccine. And it's really interesting to me because we're talking about, laws and enforcement right now. In the military, there is enforcement of certain things. And in one of those would be the use of vaccines. We are all vaccinated, and then we have our enforcement of the flu vaccine, and now we've got the COVID vaccine. So maybe next week we'll see if there is going to be more laws in place about enforcement of vaccines, and we can maybe have a little discussion on that, the good, the bad, the ugly, the true. But this is it for this week. Wow, that hour went by pretty quickly, at least for us. Thank you for joining us today. We want your comments. We want you to share this out. Please definitely contact us. And we look forward to talking to you next Monday with more breaking news. This is Bree. I'm your host for Intersections, where faith and culture and current events meet. And I'm joined with Joey Meugniot. We'll see you next time. God bless. Take care.